Do you want to have insane mechanics or have godly aim? Then you need to follow these 5 fundamentals. And I can personally guarantee if you follow these 5 fundamentals, you're going to improve your mechanics significantly. And not only that, I'm going to teach all of you how to implement these fundamentals into an actual game. So if you guys do enjoy, make sure you guys are subbed. But with that, let's get into the first way to get better mechanics, and that is your aim. Now, aim is one of the most important fundamentals to Fortnite because if you never miss a shot, you're never going to lose a fight. Now, the best overall way to become better at aiming is to obviously have good crosshair placement and have minimal crosshair movement. Now, this is obviously easier said than done, but if you can learn to keep your crosshair at somewhat head level when you're entering a fight, you're going to find yourself hitting an insane amount of shots. Now, there's a few different ways that you can practice your aim. First off, there's creative maps, such as your typical aim trainer map, but I would really recommend trying out headshot only box fights or maybe even turtle box fights, because this is the most realistic you can get, because you're obviously fighting against real players instead of bots. But if you are a really new player or you're just really new on keyboard and mouse and you are having trouble controlling your crosshair, then you should stick to simple aim training maps before you get into the advanced stuff. Now, in a lot of other games, people like to use things like Kovacs to improve aim, but personally, I have never used Kovacs because it's not realistic. But if you're, again, someone who has never touched a keyboard and mouse and you're new, this could be significantly beneficial to you because it does help with overall mouse control. Now, if you're still struggling to hit shots, then maybe you actually don't have a good sense. And if that is so, I want you guys to go to your settings and just play around with your sensitivity and find what works best with a combination of fast and slow. Because when you find that sweet spot, you're never going to find yourself missing a shot again. Now, after you've gotten that aim down, you guys need to understand that smooth movements are a lot better than flicking your crosshair, because when you flick, you have way less control than if you were to move your crosshair in a smooth motion. Now, this does go back to me mentioning having a good sensitivity, because having the ability to flick and play smooth with a good sense is going to allow you to control your movements significantly better. Now, moving on from aim, we have to talk about peaks, because having good aim is important, but if you don't take the proper peaks, then you're going to struggle, because 90% of the time when you lose a fight, it's because you took a bad peak. Now, I could go over every edit you could make and how to do it, but instead of blabbering on about that, you guys need to understand no matter what edit you make, give yourself a right hand peek. This will always allow you to see your opponent before they can see you, and that always guarantees that you get the first shot off. Also, you need to incorporate your movement so that you're as protected as possible when you take this peek. This gives you the best chance of not taking any significant damage when you take that shot. Now, to get good peeks, there's a few things you can do. First, you can practice in creative, and I don't mean 10 or 20 minutes, I mean spending a lot of time in creative. But you're probably asking yourself, what makes a good peek and a bad peek? Now, when peeking, you always need to make sure that you're not exposing yourself. For example, this is a good peek versus a bad peek. Notice how in one of the peeks I'm fully hidden from the player and I'm hiding while doing damage. And in the other example, I'm fully exposed and I put myself in a 50-50. Now, the more time you spend learning good peeks, obviously the easier it becomes to make that peek because it becomes muscle memory. But more than often, I see people still have insane peeks in creative, but they seem to struggle in-game and freeze in the moment, and they forget what to do and die because they're nervous. Now, it makes sense to be nervous because in creative, there's no punishment for taking a bad peek, because when you die on a 1v1 map, you get to respawn and try again. But in a game of ranked, for example, if a decent player sees you take a bad peek, then they're going to instantly punish you for it. And then you just die, and you're straight back to the lobby. Now, to get around this, there's 2 things I recommend. The first thing I mentioned before in previous videos, it's imagine yourself, you're still in creative, so that you keep that muscle memory in the back of your head, so that when you get in an intense fight, you can go back to those fundamentals you learned and then pick up a kill. And the next thing you can do is just simply spending a ton of time in ranked, because as I mentioned before, the more time you spend doing something, the better you get at it. Now, after learning all those good peaks, you need to have good building mechanics. Now, out of everything I've mentioned in this video, building mechanics are the hardest to master. Now, there are a few different ways you can get better at building. First, there's the obvious free building maps and piece control maps, like for example, Raiders piece control map, which is one of the best piece control maps I've ever seen. It has an insane amount of different drills you can practice and master, and when you do these movements, learn to grab every build piece you can. This is going to help you keep protected from opponents and third parties when you transfer those skills into a ranked game or a cash cup. But if you're not so decent at the game and you want to hone the most basic building mechanics, hop over maybe to a free build map that allows you to slow down your movement speed, because trying to learn certain retakes or just a simple edit at full pace is sometimes going to be hard. But if you can slow down your gameplay and get consistent with your edits and then slowly speed back up to full speed, then you're going to find yourself learning these moves way quicker than simply just free building at full speed. And if you really want to separate yourself from the rest of the players around you, you need to start making minimal edits. Now, if you don't know what a minimal edit is, basically it's making the smallest motion possible to complete an edit. Now, you may think this doesn't make a difference, but doing smaller motions instead of giant flicking motions allows you to never miss an edit, but most importantly, it keeps your crosshair controlled. This makes it a lot easier to hit your opponent when you edit. And when you flick on an edit, it takes a few more milliseconds to edit and then line your crosshair up with the opponent. These few seconds can potentially make you lose the fight even though you made a good edit. But once you've mastered these simple movements, you need to learn to take these skills you've learned from creative into ranked, and the best way to do that is just by simply spending time in ranked. So make sure you practice these retakes and go spend an hour or so in ranked using the skills that you learned so you're comfortable in an in-game scenario. And to show you this works in the background gameplay, notice how I'm practicing the same moves in creative. Like here, I'm practicing my high walls on bots. Then when it comes time to get in-game, I use the same move to piece up my opponent and pick up a kill. Or in this fight, I use my tarping skills I learned in creative to help me not get shot while I'm rotating. So don't just think this is me blabbering, this genuinely works. Now, the final fundamental I use to have insane mechanics is having good game sense and awareness. Now, the ability to read the game and understand what to do next is something you learn over time playing the game. But before I go, let me leave you some quick tips to help you along the way. The first tip is to read your opponent. Now, to read your opponent is incredibly important because it not only allows you to end fights quickly, it also allows you to take less damage. And to read opponents properly, you need to learn to read body language. So look at the opponent you're fighting and see the direction they're facing, and then build an edit based on what they do to counter their movements. Like in this example, I notice the player in this wood box is looking left, and I know that he wants to edit out in that direction, so I predict he's going to move that way, and I piece the box up next to him, and he simply walks into my crosshair. Another way to do this is by simply keeping your crosshair on the opponent. More than often, people make dumb wide edits that if you can just bait out the opponent, like maybe with a fake pickaxe swing, you can often catch them exposed and pick up a free kill. And if you can master these two things, you're going to find yourself becoming an overall way better fighter. And not only that, you'll find yourself taking way less damage. Another tip you should know is timing of rotates and timing of fighting. Learning when the right time to leave a fight because it's not worth it is super important, because when you drag out a fight for too long, a third party is inevitable. And it's okay to leave a fight because you could just go farm up, get some mats, get healthy, and then return to the fight. Now, moving up from fighting, let's talk about rotates. Now, timing of rotates is very important, but the one thing you should take away from this video is distractions. If someone is holding you on the edge of zone before a rotate, or maybe height is looking at you, look to see when they're distracted. For example, when they're spraying, or looking at other people, or maybe they're just expanding. This is the time you should start your rotate, because if you wait too long, they get set up and look back at you, and then you're going to find yourself getting beamed out of the air. Now, that is going to wrap up this video, and if you want to see how to hit Unreal rank or improve as a fighter, go check out these videos right here, and I'm out. Peace.